Hey everybody, this is Amy Bernier with Being Brave with Amy B. And as always, we're bringing you a conversation about being brave. Being brave to this podcast can be the seemingly small, because I don't believe in small acts of bravery, but the seemingly small everyday acts of bravery and that lead to the larger acts of bravery that we do in everyday life that ultimately leads to our life changing for the better. Today, we have our guest, Barb Nangle, and I'm so excited to have her on because we're talking about Barb's favorite topic and probably one of mine as well. We're talking about being brave and boundaries.
Yeah.
So before I ask you this next question, I want everybody listening to check in with themselves. When I say the word boundaries and I say, that's what we're going to be talking about for an hour, how does that feel in your body? What types of ideas come into your mind? I really want you to think about what boundaries look like in your life, because I have a feeling that the way that Barb and I, especially Barb, because she's an expert at this, but as our conversation goes on, I bet how you view what a boundary is and how it can be helpful for you. And not only that, how it can be simple and easy, especially with practice, that it's going to change your view on this. And you're going to realize, wow, you know what I've needed in my life all this time is boundaries. So pay close attention, notice how you feel throughout. And as always, if you have questions, you can go ahead and put them in the comments in the podcast and or the YouTube channel, and we will get back to continuing this conversation as we get your feedback. So thank you, Barb, for being here.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
My very first question for you is, what is your personal definition of being brave?
To me, being brave, I think it's synonymous with having courage, which is acting in the face of fear. Like, even though you're afraid, you do it anyway. That's what it means. Yeah.
Okay.
How about you? What's your personal definition of being brave?
Great question. I feel like it's changed and flowed as I've actually had more and more of these being brave conversations. I really think it's taking an action that expands you, that has an awareness of your current thought or feeling about a possible action. And it doesn't say you don't not have that fear or that sensation in your body, but you acknowledge it. You don't let it to be the boss, and you from a higher standpoint, you choose to take the more expansive action and then feel the feelings and notice the thoughts and, have an awareness while you're doing it as well.
I like how you said you don't let the feeling be the boss. I love it. I also really liked how you started prompting your listeners to tap into how they're feeling and then tap in later how they're feeling too, because for me, the way you know what the right boundary is by the way that you feel. Because when you said, what's the feeling you have when you think about boundaries, what I thought immediately that was peace, serenity, and freedom. That's what I get from boundaries. Now, when I was learning how to set boundaries, it was a whole nother story. It was like nervous, anxious, all that stuff. But now that I've learned how to set boundaries, I have more freedom than I ever had in my life. And I have more peace and serenity because I'm living my life, and I'm living my life the way I want.
Yeah. So I want you to dive into, if you wouldn't mind, sharing a story where being brave and setting a boundary, where like maybe it's like the first time that you intentionally set a boundary, or when it felt like a bigger boundary than you'd ever set before. Because I have this feeling that if the people that are listening were anything like me and you, when we first started having an awareness around boundaries, for me, there was this experience of, well, now it means I have to be mean now, like it's like putting the hammer down and, I'm never talking to this person or again, or I'm never doing that again.
Right.
And it really felt like the opposite of what I had been doing, which was having no boundaries and really giving, people pleasing and overachieving, just overdoing it in so many levels. And so boundaries felt like the opposite of that. And I associated what I had been doing as being nice. So then at first I thought boundaries meant now I have to be mean.
Yeah.
To simplify it.
It's funny that you say that, because just today I did a reel and it's called "You Don't Have to Be a Dick to Set a Boundary," because that's what I thought, the same thing too. And I want to tack on to something you're saying about being nice. So I thought I was, quote, nice. And when I learned that people pleasing is actually dishonest and manipulative, I was aghast, because I was like, oh my God, I'm a horrible person. But first, let me just unpack that, why it's dishonest. So people pleasers say yes when they don't want to. That is dishonest. And people pleasers ultimately are doing and saying the things they're doing because they want people to like them, to think that they're nice. That is called manipulation. You are not a horrible person if you're doing this. I did that. I'm not a horrible person. I didn't understand that was what I was doing. That was just the way I was. And you can be different. But now that you know that it's dishonest and manipulative, now, if you keep on doing it, if you keep not trying to change those patterns, that's a problem. Once the awareness is really the beginning of it. But I think for me, it's that deeply embedded notion of, I want to be a nice person and I want people to think I'm a nice person, was the most difficult part of learning how to set boundaries and understanding this isn't being mean. So the first boundary that I really remember working on was with actually an ex-boyfriend. So I was in 12-step recovery, which is where I learned how to set boundaries. And I was working the 12 steps in a small group of women. And I had this ex, and I had broken up with him probably 8 months before I started recovery. And so it was probably 10 months to a year, at least, before I started actually working on setting the boundaries. So we're broken up. We are not a couple. And he would email me or text me. And so this is like a typical scenario. I'm at work and I open my personal email for some legitimate reason, and I see an email from him and I feel compelled to open it immediately, get inflamed by whatever he did or said to piss me off, and for making me open it and interrupting me at work. And then I would respond, and I would spend 15 minutes constructing the perfect email with the perfect words, and it would be this long and all that stuff, and all this drama would happen. And when I started learning how to set boundaries, I learned I don't have to open the email. And that was a freaking game changer for me. The idea that I could choose not to open it was just mind-boggling and mind-blowing to me. And so that was a little bit easier than once I actually opened it and not responding right away, because I felt like, oh, he's gonna think I'm a terrible person if I don't respond. Now, meanwhile, I probably said some terrible shit to him in those other responses. I don't know, but it probably wasn't like all nicey lovey, because we're broken up, and I wanted him to stop contacting me. And
Right.
That was the other thing, is I didn't understand, the more I engage with him, the more he engages with me. So one of the most difficult parts for me, and I know for like all of my clients too, in setting boundaries, is dealing with the guilt and shame. And I will tell you that having these women in my step group was unbelievably important, because one, they sometimes literally held my hand, but also metaphorically held my hand to say, you're not a bad person. This is a decent boundary to set. You deserve to do this. And two, they helped me process my difficult feelings, because that's the thing, is we're afraid of the feelings.
Mm.
And so having someone to process those with. And so one of the things that I used to say, like when I would tell them, okay, I did it, I would go, and I didn't die. And so we started doing that as a group. We would do the hard thing. We would go like, and I didn't die. And then we would laugh about it. But it was really important to say out loud, and I didn't die, because we felt like we were going to die. And I'm talking about, I felt like I was going to die because I didn't respond to an email like that. And I thought I was going to die because I thought the other person was going to think I was a horrible person. Not like I'm out murdering people. I'm
Right.
not responding to an email and it makes me feel like I'm going to die. And so saying out loud, and I didn't die, and I didn't die. And it just like it, to me, it took me out of my what I call my lizard brain, the feeling,
Yeah.
and brought me into my human brain, the frontal lobe. Like my reasoning part of me is saying, you didn't die. You didn't die. You didn't note. You did not die. And so I have evidence. I've built up evidence. Set boundary, don't die. Set boundary, don't
Right.
die.
Well, I'm so glad that you're sharing this, and especially the way that you're sharing it, because I have a similar, the more that you and I talk, the more I'm like, wow, like we have so much in common. And I found that that I've kind of created like a very similar support group from my friends of that. Like I said this thing that was true, and I'm okay, that's now. But when I first started saying no, because for me it was, my setting boundaries had a lot to do with chronic pain, and my chronic pain forced me to not be able to do all of the things that I had been doing. So it was like a beautifully constructed scenario.
On reflection, beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, upon reflection, of course. Yeah, it was a horrible experience going this way, going into it and experiencing it. But like, it was so interesting to see how my nervous system was responding like I was going to die when I was saying, no, I can't go to that thing, or no, I can't pick you up, not actual life and death things, but the identity that I had created was dependent upon me saying yes and never saying no. So in a way, a part of me, an identity that I had constructed around these fears of abandonment and rejection, that was slowly dying.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I love that you said that. That's really, really a good point. And and that connects to what I have come to understand about boundaries, is determining your boundaries is determining your quote real identity. Or I think of it as like the boundary of Barb. Now our identities shift and change over time, but when we develop healthy boundaries, this is a chosen identity. This is not one that is given to us, or one that we believe we're supposed to have, like being a nice girl or a people pleaser or a yes person or a rescuer or a fixer or the dependable person. And it doesn't mean that you can't be those things, but you are those things out of choice. And I don't know about you, but I'd way rather have choices in my life. Like I helped people because I felt like it was what I was supposed to do. Now I help people because I want to be helpful, and because God wants me to be a helpful person. Not because it is my destiny to help people. And I also pick and choose when and where I help. I help on my terms. And you know who I helped first? Me. That's what healthy boundaries did for me too, was teach me I have to take care of what's inside of my property right here first, so that my cup runneth over. And then when I go to give, I give out of abundance.
Right. Because I don't know if you've had this experience, but in the past, I would have this like silent agreement or silent expectation that if I gave, and at that time I was giving like everything, all the time, like there was no end point really. It just kept going and going and going. And then I'd get like pissed that like nobody was doing the same thing for me. And that's again one of those experiences that upon reflection, what a beautiful opportunity that didn't feel so beautiful at the time for me to just feel what it feels like in my body to basically sacrifice myself and then be pissed that people aren't sacrificing themselves in return. Nobody agreed to do it.
I know.
I didn't even agree to do it.
Yeah. I mean,
but there we go.
What you're saying is so me. So that same guy, that same ex I was talking about is a perfect example of this. So I didn't consciously think, oh, nobody's doing it for me, but it's clear on reflection. You know, I look back, and actually that's one of the beauties of recovery is I can look back at my behavior before and say, here's what I was doing, here's what I was thinking, and here's what my motives were, whereas I was blind at the time. So this guy, I started that relationship with him, and I basically was like, I'm here to serve you. I have no needs. I'm here to meet your needs. And there was one time I literally said these words to him. Let's see if we can heal those wounds. Like I have the power to do that. Like I literally said that to him. So I was volunteering at this agency that for 5 years, and they closed.
This is laughing of recognition, not laughing at Barb. For anybody that's listening, I just want to be clear. So this is shit, me too.
Yeah.
Laughter.
So I'm volunteering at this agency for 5 years, and they closed. So I decided I'm going to start volunteering for him. So I started going to his house on Wednesday nights because he's a single dad and he works an hour from home and he teaches and he's a Sunday school teacher and he needs help. And so I go to his house on Wednesday nights and I start like doing his laundry for him. And I actually, laundry is one chore I don't really mind doing. And I do all these things for him. And then eventually we move in together. And then I'm doing his laundry like all the time. And I'm doing my laundry and I fucking hate it. And I just stopped doing it because I couldn't even have a conversation. And it was physically exhausting me. And I got really resentful of him. And when I look back now in my mind, he was, quote, taking advantage of me. He wasn't taking advantage of me. I was giving all of my time and energy and effort and love and everything to him. And I specifically said, you know, maybe I didn't actually say the words, I have no needs, but I went into the relationship acting like I have no needs. I'm here to meet all your needs. And then eventually I got resentful that he wasn't meeting my needs when I wouldn't let him. I wouldn't let him do anything for me. But then I got mad at him for not trying to help me or whatever, you know. So totally resonate with everything you said.
What's really interesting is like I recently saw that pattern in a friendship where I was constantly saying like, do you need support? How can I support you? And the person was saying, no, I'm fine. I don't need anything. And I could see that the person wasn't fine. And then eventually that same scenario happened where like she blew up and was like, you're so selfish and all this. And I literally was confounded. And then I sat with it and I was like, oh, okay. Like, this is what's real. There's a deeper thing happening here. And I can see it and she can't see it yet. And I just have to honor where she's at right now. That was the first time I had kind of been on the other side though, you know, where I had good boundaries. You know, I take a lot of time for myself, like a lot of time. For myself.
Me too.
So much time for myself.
Yeah, I mean, minimum of 2 hours in the morning. Somebody wanted me to come to a weekly networking meeting at 7 a.m. I'm like, no, I don't ever take any meeting before 9 a.m. because I have so much self-care that has to happen in the morning because I'm a jerk. I mean, I can't live like that anymore. I can't. And then I have my whole rituals at night too.
Yeah.
You know, like, I pray, I meditate, I journal, I read, I do yoga. I mean, I have to. And it is not selfish, people. It is not selfish to take care of yourself. It's actually selfless because there is more of you to give. And you're not going to fly off the handle at people when you're taking really good care of yourself.
Absolutely. And I found like I've met a lot of people along the way primarily women at this point, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't impact men. What I've noticed is I made a lot of assumptions about this pattern being of like a feminine identifying human thing. And then the more I speak with men and other non-female identifying beings, I realize like there's a very similar pattern. We just call it something different, and then it's not as visible necessarily in our mainstream culture. So I just want to say that what I've learned is I made a lot of assumptions at first about it being a woman thing, basically. And then the more that I've learned, I see, oh, well, women are just more open about talking about stuff and
how about the knight in shining armor archetype? I mean, that is the quintessential let me lay down on the ground and have you walk all over me kind of persona.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I never thought about it like that. But like another thing that I had a thought and then I forgot it, and now I have another thought. So I'm going to go with that one.
Okay.
Is that I set up the relationships to be the dynamic that they were, is that I didn't know, I wasn't taught, didn't learn that relationships were supposed to be anything else other than me doing all this stuff for other people. And maybe sometimes somebody would be like, hey, thanks. Or even better, I set it up so that people actively wanted more and told me what I was doing wasn't good enough. Like, talk about repeating a pattern from childhood again and again in adulthood. And then it's like, why doesn't this seem to be working? And why does this why does it hurt so much? This doesn't make sense. And I see a lot of people, it's easy to point to the other person, like they're a taker, they're this or they're that, but like I totally set it up that way. I didn't know it could be different. And a lot of relationships were released in the process of me starting to say yes to myself, which, it's just been interesting as I learn, as I grow. There's been like, people come and people go as I learn lessons, and some people stick around, are kind of on that same wavelength of growth. And not once have I said like, well, not out loud, at least, I'm never talking to you again. And that has been the case. I'm just like, this person can't be in my life anymore, primarily because they trigger the part of me still healing.
I'm with you.
And like, holy shit, like I need more space,
I can't be healthy around that person is the way I think of it. Like my brother's a good example. It's very, very, very difficult for me to be healthy around him. So I choose not to. But I do want to say, I love how you said we set up our relationships because when you use language like that, you're making it clear, like we have created these conditions. Like I was always blaming all the other people. I didn't necessarily come out and say it's your fault, but I was living in blame of other people. But I was the common denominator. And then, I read something, I feel like I saw it on a post on Instagram the other day about there's a difference between taking and receiving. And I think that like and what occurred to me when you were just speaking was that, those of us who feel like the people in our lives are a bunch of takers are afraid to receive because we're afraid of being seen as a taker. And a taker is very different than a receiver. A taker is someone who will just bleed you dry, but a receiver is someone who welcomes things like praise and support and compliments and assistance, but they don't expect other people to do it for them. Whereas a taker is like, I will take everything that you've got. And if you're afraid of being a taker, the chances are incredibly slim that you're ever going to be a taker. So learning to receive, now that's a gift. And I think that is another gift of having healthy boundaries, because healthy boundaries allow us to let good things in addition to keeping bad things out.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking, this is medicine for my heart and soul in this moment.
Oh,
because I've noticed that I've I've followed a lot of intuition where I've traveled around the country. And in many cases, I was on the receiving end of a guest room in somebody's house, or in this case, I'm on an air mattress in California at my friend's house. And I've just recently had the opportunity to work with this amazing coach for 6 months. And the way it came about wasn't like the traditional, like, I'm going to give you XYZ money, and in return, I'm, like, there wasn't that traditional exchange. And so I've been sitting with this bigger receiving that I have had the opportunity to take on over these last couple of days. And what has been coming up is, you don't deserve this. What did you do to, you didn't like earn this. You didn't, what are the things? It was about earning. It was about safety. It was about those like base level things. And I did have this thought actually today, because I was listening to a talk on like the consciousness of wealth and that kind of thing. And what a gift to be given all of these gifts after a lifetime of doing for others. The biggest lesson I've been needing to learn lately is receiving. And I realized that there's being brave, and I even wrote a post on it the other day. There's being brave in saying yes to receiving a bigger thing, and then being with all the old stories and all the emotions that come up, and realize like you're growing, and yeah. Would you mind speaking more about receiving and being brave? Because that seems to be the thing that like is the most resonant for me right now. And I think that upon first glance, years ago when I started saying yes to me, because that's where my journey started, or the verbiage that I used to start this evolution really is, I never ever thought about it in terms of receiving until like these last couple years, when life has looked a lot different than I thought it was, and I wasn't able to control everything and how it came to me. So would you talk more about your own your own experiences with being brave and receiving, as well as like what you teach around that? I would love to hear that.
Yeah. So learning to ask for help is incredibly important in having healthy boundaries and just being an all-around healthy person. And I realized in my journey to develop healthy boundaries that first, that a lot of my thinking was subconscious, that I subconsciously believed that asking for help was weak.
Yep.
It is not. There's also an embedded assumption there that weak equals bad or wrong. Weak is not bad. It is not wrong. It is just weak. So let's ditch those assumptions. All right.
You don't need to judge it.
Right.
It can be true, but it doesn't have to be mired with all this other shit.
Right, exactly. And if you think about a person standing alone, and then think about a person standing in a chain of people holding hands. What's stronger? That's not weak. To ask to reach out your hands and hold the hands of other people. I mean, that's strong, right?
Yes.
And that helped me to realize that one of the reasons why it was so difficult for me to ask for help was that I thought it was weak, which meant all those people I was rescuing and saving and fixing and people pleasing all those years, that I thought I was better than them. And that was humbling as hell, because I don't actually believe I'm better than anybody else. And that was like a hard pill to swallow. And I was like, oh, damn. So here I am thinking I'm nice. Meanwhile, I lie, I manipulate, and I think I'm better than people. Oh, goodness. Like, this was really, like, talk about, you got to be brave to face that shit, right?
Yes.
So learning how to ask people for help has been such a delight. I mean, so when I was learning how to do it, this is, again, I was in that step group, And what happened was that one of us one day said, I was really upset the other day and I was going to call one of you guys for support, and I talked myself out of it. And the rest of us were like, oh my God, I keep doing the same thing. I keep saying, oh, what are they going to do? And so they talk. So we were like, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to make a pact that as soon as we have the impulse to reach out and ask for help or support or whatever, we're going to follow that impulse and we're not going to talk ourselves out of it. So we're like, okay, we made a pact. Well, then none of us did it. So we talked about it out loud. We addressed it. We made a pact and we still couldn't do it. Like, that is how hard reaching out for help is. And then eventually, we were able to do that. And what a relief to get help. So I remember the first time I cried on a friend's shoulder. I was like, it literally felt like the grief was sucked out of me, because I was a crier my whole life, but I did it alone at home, isolated in the evenings, and I did it for hours at a time. But to cry in front of another, not just in front of, but like literally on another person, what a gift. And so now I'm in recovery. I think I've made that clear. I'm in 12-step recovery. When somebody, like especially a newcomer, says, what are they going to do for me if I'm crying? I'm like, you know what they're going to do for you? They're going to witness you, and they're going to be connected to you, because we humans are wired for connection. We need connection to thrive. And so what they say is the opposite of addiction is connection. Right.
Absolutely.
And so even if somebody just listens to you, even if it's on the phone and they're just sitting there with you crying. And for me personally, because I'm whole now, I have the capacity to witness someone's grievous crying and be fully present there. It's not happening to me. I'm not taking it on. And I can be like a loving witness for them and just let them be and let them express. And as the person who's received that kind of thing from other people, like, you have no idea what a gift is. And when I said, the first time I cried on someone's shoulder, I literally felt like the grief was sucked out of me. It felt to me like, there's a saying, a happy marriage multiplies joys and divides sorrows. And I think that that's an apt description of what happened. Was my sorrow was divided because I shared it with someone, and it wasn't so great. So, that has been an enormous help. And then the other thing that I want to say about all this, about receiving, is something that has happened for me in the course of my recovery is that I have become much more comfortable with my femininity. And to me, femininity has to do with receptivity. I am a lifelong feminist. I'm also an intellectual. And so, like, I had all these ideas of what it meant to be a good feminist.
Of course.
And I believe I am a good feminist. And even though, like, my definition of a feminist is someone who, like, advocates for people of all kinds to have choices in their life, I didn't feel like I could make certain choices because it wasn't being a good feminist. And I happen to also be a heterosexual woman. So I'm attracted to men. I was dating, I've always dated men, and I'm in a heterosexual, very loving, fulfilling relationship. And the way that's manifested in this relationship is that we have this little thing that we do in our relationship where I'll say to, his name is Chuck, I'll say, Chuck, will you carry my books home from school for me? And it's like my will you be the boy and I'll be the girl kind of thing. And it's like we had conversations about how I'm feeling more comfortable with receiving. I'm feeling more comfortable in my femininity. And he's a rather feminist man, but he also likes being a guy. So he likes being that person who, quote, carries my books home from school for me. And we joke about it now, but it's this way of reinforcing for us. Like, he wants to be the boy and I want to be the girl, and I want to feel okay about it. And I can tell you that one of the manifestations of that is I've started becoming attracted to these young male singers that I call pop boys, who sing in these like yearning voices for young girls. I didn't allow myself to like that music when I was a teenager. I judged that. And I think it was because, like, how dare they like perpetuate patriarchy and all that shit. And now I'm like, I fucking like the music and I want a boy to sing with a yearning voice to me. And in fact, I picture my 65 or 63-year-old sweetheart singing those songs to me. So to me, this and I actually, I'm getting a little bit sidetracked here, but he is the person that I have learned the most about receiving from and asking him to help me. So during the pandemic, when it first began, we have done yoga together at a studio at noon twice a week. And so during the pandemic, one day he would go to my house and one day I would come to his house. Now he is on disability and basically retired, and I have my own business and I have 2 part-time jobs and I'm in recovery. So I finally said to him, listen, do you think that you could possibly come over to my house both days? And he was like, absolutely. Are you kidding me? Like I couldn't have done that in years past but it was
Yeah.
literally more than 2 hours out of my day because he lives on the other side of town. Plus there was the whole yoga thing, and then changing clothes
Right.
and all that stuff. And so to be able to say to him, would you mind coming to my place? And that there's something else that I asked him to do recently for me that was really huge, but it was very easy to do. That is a way better example of that, but it's not coming to mind. If it does,
That's
I
okay.
will tell you. But
Okay.
I don't feel like I owe him when I ask him things. And I tell him that. I'll tell him like 2 days later, oh, you know when I asked you to do that thing for me the other day? I can't believe it, but I don't feel like I owe you anything. He was like, good. Like, I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you feel like you can ask me for help because I don't feel like
Yeah.
I owe you either, or you owe me either.
Right. So I'm going to interject with a little bit of a story because I know what it feels like. Like I'm remembering like in my body in this moment. Actually, we'll use this as an opportunity for the listeners as well. I want everybody to just sit with the first time, or even if it's a small thing, the first time they were able to receive something and just receive it. It could be that time when somebody gave you a compliment and you said thank you, and your brain didn't say, whatever, you're just saying that because blah, 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 blah. Or maybe somebody opened a door for you and, you didn't make it mean that, you were weak and that I can open my own door. I don't need you to
Right.
open
I
my
used to
door,
say that shit. I
Oh
did.
yeah.
Yep,
Oh
I
yeah.
did.
And so recently, especially with the podcast, I have a part-time job, but what I've noticed is with the podcast, it's all I want to do. It's all I want to do. I want to talk to people, and my brain doesn't see the connection from like talking to people, having a great time, learning things and sharing it, to like being able to support myself and all of that stuff. So the way that I've learned to receive, because I can see I'm still on a journey for that, is that like people will give me things, like people will like give me money or give me things that I need or things like that. And it's been a very interesting process of, oh, it's really interesting that it's not like money.
Right.
Oh, okay. So I'm able to receive like a place to stay, or, a gift of like a thing that I've wanted, but like
program.
a coaching program, like, yeah, like, right. A coaching program. I was given a coaching program last week. Is that I remember, and this is how it's connected me and you, Barb, is when I worked one-on-one with Amanda, I had a friend that said, I want to pay for you to do this. And it was almost $2,000 money given to her in order for me to work one-on-one with her for 3 months. And Barb and I know each other through Amanda Rivera, who's amazing, by the way.
Yes, she is. Yes, she
and
is.
I remember the experience of this person that I know, I have a relationship with them, like they're a friend. And I remember them like me being like, okay, cool. And like, what information do you need? And like contacting Amanda and hooking them up. And I remember thinking, there's no part of me right now that feels that I need to do or be or anything for this person that just gave me this gift. Now, did I like keep him informed as to like what I was learning? Yeah, because I was excited to share like this gift that you've given me has like opened up so many things, and I want to share my happiness and my learning and my celebration with you. But did I come from a place of now I have to report to this person and tell them all that I'm learning. No, I was joyfully sharing. And one of the beliefs that's really starting to solidify for me is that people want to help. Is that people want to help. And it's allowed me to post more about like the Patreon for the podcast, and that the merch for the podcast and my Amazon wish list and all this stuff. It's still an effort. It's still like there's a little bit of a thing. However, I've come such a long way that I'm open to, this is an action that I can take to receive in order to support this project, myself, etc. And I would never have been able I remember 4 years ago when I moved to Denver from Baltimore, and it was like the universe was like, bitch, you got your ass to Denver. Like everything, everywhere I looked, it was like Denver, Denver, Denver. I was like, is the TV talking about Denver? Turn on the TV. There it is. Open my phone. There it is. And I'm like, oh my, this has never happened before. This is so like almost overwhelming that to ignore it would just be like not the right step. But I didn't know how I was getting from there to there. And my friend on my 40th birthday, so this is like almost the fourth anniversary of this shift, just in a couple of weeks, my friend was like, well, why don't you start a GoFundMe and tell your story, like, and say like, if I've helped you, like I would love support around this. Yo, my whole brain exploded over and over and over and over and over again, because I raised like $2,000, or people helped me, and supported me, and I created $2,000 in 2 weeks. And it was such an arduous, hard process, And now it's like, oh, isn't that funny? It appears at this moment that that's what I need to do in order to build this empire through my podcasts and courses and stuff. So our journeys aren't necessarily going to look exactly the same, but the feeling of being able to receive it's freedom. You're absolutely right. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
But in this conversation, it's really just opening up. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, what I say all the time is help is awesome. I love help. I love help. Awesome.
So I remember a friend of mine, Steph, she's like, people like to help you. She's like, people like to help you and people like to give you things. She's been saying that to me for over 4 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, there. It's like, it's been such a thing that I didn't even realize it's been happening.
Yeah.
And really realizing that it's a gift to give to others. It's a gift to support others. Like it feels awesome when you give from a place of, this is fun to do. Like, I'm really happy that I can give this to someone.
From a place of, this is fun to do and I choose to, not I'm obligated. Right.
Absolutely.
So this kind of giving that we're talking about is where I was talking about giving from a place of abundance. Whereas when I was giving, it was from a place of lack. And I mean that in 2 ways. One, I was depleted of energy.
Absolutely.
And 2, ultimately, I was doing it because I wanted people to like me. I didn't know that. So I went to the world to get liking, get love, right? Instead of going to the world to give. And so now I fill my own cup up. My cup runneth over because I take really good care of myself. I have really good boundaries. I do things that energize me. I minimize the things that drain me. And so when I go to the world, actually, I want to say this one last thing. A friend of mine says, when you're under pressure, what's in you and you get squeezed comes out. So if what's in you is peace and love and serenity, that's what comes out. But if what's inside of you is like annoyance and frustration and resentment, and that's what comes out. And so what I go to the world to give is what I have, which is love that I'm filled with, because I start by loving myself, and then I make myself be around people who are loving and do loving things. And so that kind of giving from abundance, in that I want to contribute, as opposed to I want you to like me. It's not an exchange. It's a gift.
It's a gift.
That matters. And to me, choice is the most important thing. Am I choosing to do this thing? Am I choosing to help this person? Am I choosing, or am I feeling like, what are they going to think of me? Or I'm going to be a bad person, or what will people say? Like, that's not what matters. Is what do you think? And if you're lying to yourself, even if you don't have a conscious thought, on some level, that you're lying, and that's not good. It's not like one of the things I tell my clients all the time is building healthy boundaries is about building your integrity, about living in line with your values. So things that don't have integrity have cracked foundation. So in the physical world, a bridge that doesn't have integrity has a cracked foundation. Well, a person that has no integrity has a cracked foundation. And so my understanding of my building healthy boundaries is that I'm whole now. So all of my cracks have been filled in, all of my fragments and pieces have been integrated into one coherent whole. And so I can be rocked by things that happen to me, but I can't be shattered by them the way I used to, because I'm whole now. And that's what this is all about. And the thing about when we're not brave, we're acting out of fear that we're gonna be broken. But here's the thing, you are.
You already are.
You already are broken, and it's being brave that's going to make you whole. That's, that's what's gonna do it, is taking, even if it's the teeniest, tiniest little action,
Yeah, and I think like what I have come to a lot of the same realizations as you are, just in a different way. And I remember about like when I realized that people pleasing was being manipulative and lying, I was like, I had just realized it, and then and then I also was going on like a first date, not so long after that, and I couldn't not share like that. I had this like realization. I'm like, I am a liar. I've been accidentally on purpose lying my whole life.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really important, because my inner critic is a really, really big, fat, meanie head, like a really big jerk. And it's really easy for me to head on that like slippery slope of like being horrified that I've been a manipulator and I've been lying. But the truth is that I didn't learn it any differently. Like no one taught me any differently.
Well, it came from somewhere. Yeah.
Right. I was taught to be this way, and to suppress what I was feeling in my body and my emotions, and to just push through. Yeah. And so the reason I'm saying this is because for me, I thought, harsh, learning things, but then being harsh about it, like in the name of like being disciplined, was the way. And for me, that wasn't the way. That was actually me just harming myself more. Being gentle with the part of you and compassionate to the part of you that learned this thing is actually in survival mode. It's doing the best that it can to keep you safe. Right. So the same, you're an afraid person. You're coming. These decisions are all coming from being afraid that you're not going to be loved. You're going to be left. You're going to be rejected. So if a kid came up to us and was like, I'm afraid like they're not going to like me and they're going to laugh at me, would you then turn around and be like, well, suck it up, kid? Like, get your act together. Yeah. And that's the same inside.
Right. Exactly. I've learned that because I love myself, because I think I always liked myself, but it was clear I didn't love myself. That because I love myself now, I don't need you to love me the way that I did before. I would like for you to love me, but I'm not going to die if you don't, because I love me. And that's the same thing with abandonment. I think you touched on abandonment. Like when I stopped abandoning myself, I stopped being afraid of abandonment, which makes total sense because I'm no longer abandoned. And then I happen to be a higher power person. In fact, my business is called Higher Power Coaching and Consulting because I'm higher powered. That for me, when you add like, I love me, and then I have a higher power that loves me, of course, I'm not afraid of abandonment anymore because I'm not abandoned.
Right.
And therefore I'm not attracting people who abandon me anymore,
It's so true. It's so true. The more I've healed myself, the more I've looked at the patterns that I've repeated over and over, from a place of wanting to keep myself safe, my inner child just doing its darndest to keep me safe. The more the higher quality relationships I've had, the more I've been able to like actually feel safe expressing my feelings that aren't pretty, like I don't feel like I can have a full spectrum experience and share that. And God, I had no idea how healing in and of itself, and being able to be there for others as well as yourself, and just like support from a place of we're in this together, not I'm going to do it for you, which I don't know. I don't think I ever consciously like had that like awareness of a belief, but I really think that there was a part of me that wasn't, even though I was always doing and doing it myself, I think that I was fighting the belief that I'm not sure if I can do it myself. It's really interesting how like what I found is like the seemingly exaggerated parts of me are really have a belief that's hosted in the opposite.
Yeah. I think I need to ponder that. I feel like you've said something that will blossom into a full-blown understanding soon.
I'll give an example and then I have a question for you.
Okay.
Like when that need to be nice, that need to be kind, that need to be good, someone kind of brought it to my attention. Well, if you're always trying to be good, trying to be nice, trying to be kind, are you operating from the belief that who you be is kind, who you be is good, who you be is
precisely.
nice?
Yes.
And the answer was, oh shit. So it's like, well, if the belief was like, if I'm not trying to be all these things, then I'm not them.
Right. So that is another way of saying this, that I wanted you to like me because ultimately I didn't like me. So I'm okay if you like me because I have some evidence out there in the world that I'm likable, because deep down inside, I don't like me.
Yeah.
Or for me, it was, I don't love me. It was really more about love than about like. But I agree, absolutely. And I can see that now. And one of the reasons I didn't like me, because I lied and I manipulated. Right. But I didn't know this was all like deeply subconscious shit. So the way to start liking yourself better is to start living in line with your values and setting healthy boundaries and showing up for yourself and stopping abandoning yourself and treating yourself like shit and putting yourself in harm's way and hanging out with people that treat you like shit.
Yeah. And I found too is your body will tell you. Like if you let your body have a voice, then your body's going to tell you when, because I think like for me, there was some self-trust. Oh, I've like abandoned myself so much. Like, how can I trust that I'm not going to do it again? That's even come up in like, as I grow, like as I become more successful, as I become more visible. Oh, is this the thing that's going to get me to slide back? And the answer is no, like there is no sliding back. There's just a perception of it, and a fear. And then you go back to your evidence. And I realize that when I follow my body, it really keeps me safe, and that's a great place to start for people who are like, okay, cool. Like, oh, I listened to Amy and Barb and now I'm like, fuck, I have shitty boundaries or whatever, Well, I'm going to ask this of you as well. But my first inclination would be like, if you don't know where to start noticing how your body feels. and go from there. And this leads up to my question to Barb is, if you had like one piece of wisdom, not that you could impart on people, like let's pretend we could like plant the seed and it becomes a truth within everyone, what would you want people to, based on your being brave experience, based upon your life, based upon all that you've learned and that you've teach, what do you really want people to deeply know?
Keep the focus on yourself, 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 keep the focus on yourself. And I say that 5 times because when I did a group coaching program, I couldn't get the point across. So I said it, I'm going to tell you guys my top 5 rules, and I repeated it 5 times. And that was the thing they remembered the most. And it really hit home for them. So what I mean by that is, as people pleasers, codependents, enablers, all that kind of thing, we're so used to focusing out there that we completely ignore what's going on in here. And out there, we have no control, which is why we're drained all the time, because that is an endless drain of energy. And then because you're doing that, you can't focus in here. You have nothing left. So when you focus in here first and take care of yourself first, that is where you actually can make a difference and can like change things. And so you're going to see some difference. But I want to give a couple of examples of just the mind shift of keeping the focus on yourself instead of someone else. So instead of saying you're driving like a maniac, you say, I feel unsafe. Instead of saying you're confusing me, you say, I don't follow you. Or instead of saying you never listen, you say, I feel unheard. So these are just examples of this. This is what it looks like to keep the focus on yourself. And the other thing is keep the focus on yourself in the here and now. What's happening right now, not what happened 15 years ago or what am I afraid is going to happen. Keep the focus on yourself in the here and now. And the reason is because the only thing in the entire world that you can control is yourself. And so that is where you're going to be able to make movement. When you become brave for you, not for other people. That would be my thing, is this: keep the focus on yourself.
I love those examples too, because those are pivotal. Like, it might just seem like a couple of phrases you shared, like to anyone might be new for you. And I just want to point to the gravity of expressing yourself in that, from that I am feeling, because that's, like, that's it.
It's centering yourself. You're not making it about them. You're making it about you, which means you're making your life about you. I feel unsafe, not you're a shitty driver. Well, if I feel unsafe, guess who needs to do something about it? If they don't start driving safely, get out of the car.
Right.
But if it's really there to blame, then you're waiting for them to change.
Right. Because for me, when I can identify how I'm feeling, then I can also follow that up with, what do I need? Right. And instead of looking to other people to give me that thing, I ask myself, how can I give that to myself? That pairing has been pivotal as well.
Yeah,
so
that I want to say one last thing about that.
Sure.
One of the most important quotes I learned in recovery, so important that I write it in my journal like 5 days ahead, so that when I come across it on a blank page, I don't miss it. And it's this: let go of my expectations of other people and meet my own needs. I didn't know that I was expecting other people to meet my needs because I thought I was self-sufficient. But I wanted people to like me, for example, affirm me, validate me. And it doesn't mean I don't want people to do that, but I don't need people to do that because I do it for myself. And that means, again, I go to the world with abundance because I do those things for myself.
Well, Barb, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Me too.
And I definitely would love to have you back to continue our conversation about being brave and boundaries. I just feel like, specifically in my life, like that has been like the key to being brave anywhere, is first being brave within myself.
Yeah.
And seeing those things and accepting those things in the moment when I realized the beliefs that are driving my behaviors. So for anybody that has enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, or even more so, and is curious about where you can find Barb and what she has to offer, and you just want to get into her world and hear more of what she has to say and what she has to share with you from her own experiences, you know, firsthand of growing to where she is and continuing to grow from this point forward. Where can people find you? What kinds of things do you offer that they can say yes to? And yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this fantastic conversation and this opportunity to share with your listeners about being brave. So my favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. I am also the host of the podcast Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. And primarily, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. They're 10 to 20-minute episodes weekly. Right now, I think there's 147 episodes that are out. I do have guests every 10th episode, which are a little bit longer. And my website is higherpowercc.com. I have a ton of free resources on boundaries. There's a drop-down menu that says My Issue Is, and it's boundaries. Go to that page, and I'll give that link to Amy too. There's free resources on boundaries there. I do private and group coaching. I'm not recruiting for group coaching right now, but I do private coaching on boundaries. It's 12 weeks, one-on-one, 60-minute Zoom meetings, and then you have, 24/7 Telegram support. You get a boundaries workbook to do exercises to reinforce the curriculum and lessons that we do and build your own personalized boundary system. I also do a 90-minute romantic boundaries intensive coaching session. And I am working on, and may have ready by the time this podcast comes out, a VIP day. It's called Feminine Biz Boundaries, and it's to teach women entrepreneurs how to have boundaries in their business so that they can live their lives on purpose. I had one client say to me, I left my 9 to 5 and now I'm working 24/7. And I was like, no, that's not what we want. So
happened to me too when I first started.
Yeah, I'm so happy to help. Reach out to me, DM me on Instagram, and would love to connect with you, and would love it if you'd listen to my podcast. And again, I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and I love that you're spreading the message of being brave. I love it, love it, love it.
Thank you. So basically, Barb's saying you can go to Instagram, you can go to her website, you can binge her podcast, you can just gather all of her materials and go through it at your own pace. And if you're ready now, or if you're ready later, you can reach out to Barb and she will have a program for you and where you are now, whether that's in business, romance, or just you're ready to start your boundaries journey. And it would be so much easier to have Barb on your side, on your team. There's just so much to say about this, and I can't wait to have you back. You have made a difference in my life, in showing up in the way that you do in the areas that we've connected, both one-on-one and in group.
Ditto.
Yeah, I'm getting chills. How you be in the world is helping, is impacting, is rippling out to me, to others, and you're really making a difference. And I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual. Thank you.
I'm so glad. For anybody listening, all of Barb's contact information will be in the show notes, as well as in the subscription information on YouTube. I think that's what it's called. It's underneath the subscribe button. Subscribe to the podcast. Check out our Patreon. It's so interesting, and I'll say it again, and I said it before, it's so interesting that receiving is such a big piece of having boundaries and freedom and being able to ask for help and support. And through this podcast, it literally forces me to ask, If you're listening to this and you love it and you want somebody to listen to it, share it.
Right.
If you feel like being brave, like I do, I feel that being brave and being brave stories help us connect more deeply to ourselves, give us insights into ourselves as well as into other people, and really helps us see how our humanity is what we all have in common. We're experiencing so many things that are similar, and it's the feelings that we feel as we make shifts, as we have different experiences. And the goal of this podcast is to create community, connection, and compassion worldwide. And the way that that happens is through checking out the Patreon and supporting if you can, subscribing to the podcast and the YouTube channel, share, like, love, comment, buy a shirt, check out the course, Being Brave, Finding Your Voice as a Leader, and more. This is me asking everyone listening to, if you felt seen, heard, understood, had an aha moment while listening to this podcast with Barb, please, in whatever way you can, please support this, please help this project, because it's here to help shift the world.
Yes.
So until next time, I see you, I believe in you, and I love you. And don't forget to be brave and say yes to you. All the parts of you, even the parts that might need some more boundaries. Bye, everybody.